The afternoon sun hung lazily over the quiet suburban street in Louisville, Kentucky, painting the Rodriguez family's backyard barbecue in golden light. It was the kind of perfect summer Saturday that would be remembered in photo albums and annual family stories, until it became the day that changed everything forever. 3-year-old Emma Rodriguez was a whirlwind of energy in her favorite yellow sundress, the one with tiny butterflies embroidered along the hem. Her blonde pigtails bounced rhythmically as she chased actual butterflies across her grandmother's immaculately maintained front lawn, her infectious giggle carrying over the wooden fence to where the adults gathered. The sweet smell of charcoal-grilled burgers mixed with freshly cut grass, and someone's radio played classic rock softly in the background. "Emma, baby, don't go too far," Maria Rodriguez called out, glancing up from the potato salad she was arranging on the picnic table. Her daughter waved enthusiastically, showing no signs of slowing down her butterfly pursuit. Maria smiled, her heart full. These family gatherings were everything to her, 3 generations together, sharing food, laughter, and love. Grandmother Carmen sat in her favorite lawn chair, fanning herself with a folded newspaper and keeping one eye on her energetic granddaughter. "That child has more energy than a firework," she chuckled to Maria's brother, Tony, who was manning the grill with the focused intensity of a surgeon. The family had gathered to celebrate Carmen's 65th birthday, and nearly 20 relatives filled the backyard with noise and joy. Emma spotted a particularly beautiful monarch butterfly and squealed with delight, following it toward the front yard. The property wasn't fenced in the front, just an open lawn that stretched to the sidewalk and the quiet residential street beyond. Carmen watched the little girl round the corner of the house, her yellow dress disappearing from view for just a moment. "I'll check on her," Carmen said, starting to rise from her chair. But Maria was already turning toward the front yard, maternal instinct kicking in. "Emma, sweetie, stay where Mommy can see you," she called out, setting down the serving spoon and wiping her hands on her apron. She walked around the side of the house, expecting to see her daughter crouched in the grass, examining some fascinating bug or flower. The front yard was empty. "Emma," Maria's voice carried a note of curiosity rather than concern. The child was probably hiding behind the large oak tree, playing one of her favorite games. "Emma, honey, where are you?" Silence answered her. "Emma," Maria's voice rose slightly, her pace quickening as she checked behind the tree, behind the mailbox, along the side of the house. "This isn't funny, baby. Come out now." The butterfly landed on a rose bush, wings opening and closing peacefully, but there was no little girl chasing it anymore. "Emma," Maria's scream shattered the peaceful afternoon like broken glass. "Emma, Carmen, Tony, somebody help me, she's gone." The backyard erupted into chaos. Tony dropped the spatula, burgers forgotten, sprinting toward his sister's panicked voice. Carmen moved faster than she had in years, her heart already knowing what her mind refused to accept. Other family members poured out of the house, faces shifting from confusion to horror in seconds. "What do you mean gone?" Tony demanded, already pulling out his cell phone. She was right here." I don't know. Maria was hyperventilating, running into the street, looking both ways frantically. Emma, Mommy's here, come out, baby." Carmen stood frozen on the front lawn, her face ashen, one trembling hand pressed against her mouth. "She was right there," she whispered. "I saw her. She was right there, just 30 seconds ago." Neighbors emerged from their houses, alarmed by the screams. Mr. Patterson from next door immediately called 911. Mrs. Chen from across the street grabbed her teenage son. "Get on your bike, check every street in a 6-block radius. Now." Within 4 minutes, 4 agonizing minutes that felt like hours, police sirens wailed in the distance. Maria collapsed on the front lawn, her screams dissolving into gut-wrenching sobs that would haunt everyone who heard them. She clutched fistfuls of grass where her daughter had been standing moments before, her body shaking uncontrollably. "Please, God, please," she sobbed. "Not my baby, please not my baby." Two patrol cars screeched to a halt in front of the house. Officers immediately began securing the scene, asking rapid-fire questions. What was she wearing? Any distinguishing features? Did anyone see anything? A car? A person? Nothing. No one had seen anything. Emma Rodriguez had vanished as if she'd never existed, except her mother's anguished cries proved she had been real, had been loved, had been right there. Detective Sarah Morrison arrived 12 minutes after the first call, her unmarked sedan barely in park before she was out and moving toward the distraught mother. A 20-year veteran with the Louisville Metro Police, Morrison had worked dozens of missing children cases. The first hour was critical. The first hour could mean everything. She knelt beside Maria, placing a firm but gentle hand on the woman's shoulder. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm Detective Morrison. We're going to find your daughter, but I need you to focus for me. Can you do that?" Maria looked up, her face streaked with tears and mascara, her eyes wild with terror. She was playing. She was just playing. I know. Morrison's voice was steady, authoritative, the voice of someone who would move heaven and earth to bring Emma home. K-9 units are 3 minutes out. We're setting up roadblocks. Every officer in Louisville is looking for your little girl. Behind them, the abandoned barbecue grill still smoked, burgers burning forgotten. Emma's stuffed bunny lay in the grass where she dropped it, one ear in the dirt, button eyes staring at an empty sky. The nightmare had begun. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon when K-9 officer James Hartley arrived at the Rodriguez residence. His 4-year-old German shepherd, Rex, alert and ready in the back of his specialized police vehicle. Hartley had been in the middle of a training exercise 30 miles away when the Amber Alert came through. He dropped everything, lights and sirens screaming the entire way back to Louisville. Rex wasn't just any police dog. The German Shepherd had an extraordinary success rate, 17 missing persons found in 3 years, including 2 children recovered alive from life-threatening situations. His black and tan coat gleamed under the fatting sunlight as Hartley attached the tracking lead, and his intelligent brown eyes seemed to understand the urgency radiating from every human present. "We need something with the child's scent," Hartley said, his voice calm and professional despite the chaos surrounding them. "Unwashed clothing is best, something she wore recently that hasn't been handled by too many people." Maria stumbled into the house, her legs barely supporting her weight, and returned moments later clutching Emma's favorite stuffed bunny. The one the little girl slept with every single night. The one that smelled like baby shampoo and innocence, and everything Maria was terrified she'd never hold again. "This," Maria whispered, pressing the worn bunny into Hartley's hands. "She takes it everywhere. She dropped it when..." Her voice broke completely. Hartley took the bunny with reverent care, as if he were handling a sacred relic. "We're going to find her, Mrs. Rodriguez. Rex is the best there is." He knelt beside Rex, letting the dog smell the bunny thoroughly. The German Shepherd's entire demeanor changed, his casual alertness transformed into laser-focused intensity. His nose worked over every inch of the stuffed animal, processing scent molecules invisible to human senses, building a scent profile that would become his sole mission. Such, Hartley commanded in German, "Search." Rex's head snapped up, nose immediately working the air. He pulled toward the front yard, tracking the invisible trail Emma had left behind. His nose dropped to the grass where she'd been playing, moving in tight circles, confirming the scent. Then he caught something. His head jerked toward the street, and he pulled hard on the lead. "He's got her," Hartley announced, adrenaline spiking through his veins. "Everyone stay back, let him work." Detective Morrison immediately coordinated with dispatch. K-9 unit has sent trail heading north on Maple Street. Need all available units for mobile tracking. Aviation support requested. Rex moved with purpose, his powerful legs eating up ground as he followed Emma's scent down the sidewalk. Hartley jogged behind him, reading every movement, every behavior. The dog paused at the corner of Maple and 3rd, his nose working in circles, processing. Someone had carried Emma here. The scent pattern changed from walking to being transported. She was picked up here, Hartley radioed. Scent indicates vehicular transport. Rex is tracking residual scent trail, likely direction of travel. Behind them, a convoy of police vehicles followed at a respectful distance. Maria sat in Detective Morrison's sedan, her hands pressed against the window, watching Rex work with desperate hope. Grandmother Carmen had been taken home by relatives, sedated by paramedics after nearly collapsing from shock. The entire neighborhood stood on porches and lawns, watching the police procession pass, their own children held close. Rex continued north, occasionally pausing where the vehicle must have stopped at traffic lights or stop signs, picking up concentrations of Emma's scent that had drifted from the vehicle. This wasn't a straight track anymore. This was detective work at the most primal level, using millions of years of evolutionary canine superiority to hunt through an urban landscape. 45 minutes into the track, Rex led them into Louisville's industrial district, a maze of warehouses, abandoned factories, and forgotten buildings that had once been the city's economic heart, but now stood as hollow monuments to industries long gone. The sun had fully set now, and portable floodlights illuminated Rex's path as he worked. "This area has 73 abandoned structures," Morrison said grimly, studying a map on her tablet. It could take days to search them all manually. But Rex didn't need days. He needed only his nose and his training. Hour after hour through that endless night, Rex worked tirelessly. Other K-9 units had joined the search, spreading out to cover more ground, but Rex remained the primary tracker. Hartley watched his partner with growing concern. The dog had been working for nearly 3 hours straight, refusing breaks, driven by something beyond training. It was as if Rex understood what was at stake. At 2:47 a.m., Rex's behavior changed dramatically. They were in the oldest section of the industrial district, where buildings literally crumbled from neglect. The German shepherd's ears pinned back, his tail rigid, and he released a low, focused growl, not aggressive but alert. He pulled harder on the lead, moving faster. "He's got strong scent," Hartley radioed, his heart hammering. "Moving to abandoned textile warehouse, 1847 Industrial Boulevard. Strong alert behavior." Police vehicles converged from all directions. SWAT teams poured out in tactical formation. Detective Morrison held Maria back as she tried to jump from the sedan. "Let them do their job," Morrison said firmly, though her own hands were shaking. Rex led the teams to a side entrance, a rusty metal door hanging loose on broken hinges. He sat, the alert that meant his target was inside, and looked up at Hartley with those intelligent brown eyes. "Good boy," Hartley whispered. "Such brave boy." SWAT breached the door with controlled violence. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, illuminating years of decay and abandonment. And then, a sound that made every heart stop. A child's whimper. "Clear, we have her. Child LOCATED." The radio crackled to life with the most beautiful words Maria Rodriguez had ever heard. Emma was huddled in a far corner of the warehouse, filthy and terrified but alive. Her yellow sundress was torn and dirty, her face streaked with tears, but her chest rose and fell with precious breath. The moment she saw the police flashlights, she screamed, not in fear but in desperate hope. "Mommy, I want him, why mommy?" Paramedics rushed forward, but before anyone could stop her, Maria broke through the perimeter and ran to her daughter. She scooped Emma into her arms, both of them sobbing, clutching each other with the fierce desperation of souls reunited from the abyss. Michael Brennan was apprehended attempting to flee through a back exit. He offered no resistance, no explanation, no remorse. Rex sat calmly beside Hartley, mission accomplished, waiting for his reward ball. The nightmare had ended. But the journey toward justice was just beginning. 6 months had passed since that terrible night, and the healing had been painfully slow. Emma still woke up screaming from nightmares. Maria had quit her job to be with her daughter every moment. The little girl who once chased butterflies without fear now clutched her mother's hand in parking lots, her eyes scanning every stranger with wariness no 3-year-old should possess. But today, they faced a different kind of nightmare, one wrapped in legal procedure and expensive suits. Jefferson County District Court buzzed with barely contained energy as jury selection finally concluded. The case had captivated Louisville and beyond. The People v. Michael James Brennan. Kidnapping, child endangerment, false imprisonment. The charges carried a potential sentence of 40 years, but first, they had to secure a conviction. Lead prosecutor Linda Chang stood at her table, organizing files with hands that trembled slightly despite her 15 years of courtroom experience. This case was different. This case had kept her awake for months, reviewing evidence, searching for the smoking gun that would put Brennan away forever. The problem was devastating in its simplicity. They didn't have one. Across the aisle, defense attorney Marcus Wellington exuded expensive confidence. His $3,000 suit was perfectly tailored, his silver hair impeccably styled, and his reputation for getting defendants acquitted was legendary. He'd taken Brennan's case pro bono. The publicity alone would be worth millions. Now he sat reviewing his notes with the casual ease of a man who knew he held the winning cards. Judge Patricia Chen entered, her black robe swirling as she took the bench. A no-nonsense jurist with 23 years on the bench, Chen ran her courtroom with iron discipline. "Be seated," she commanded, and the packed gallery immediately complied. "Mr. Wellington, is the defense ready to proceed?" "We are, Your Honor." Wellington's smile was practiced and cold. "Ms. Chang." "The people are ready, Your Honor." Chang's voice was steady, but her co-counsel, young prosecutor David Martinez, could see the tension in her shoulders. The trial began with opening statements. Chang approached the jury box, making eye contact with each of the 12 citizens who held Emma Rodriguez's justice in their hands. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a case about a monster who stole a child from her family," Chang began, her voice resonating with controlled passion. On July 15th, 3-year-old Emma Rodriguez was playing in her grandmother's yard when Michael Brennan abducted her, held her captive in a warehouse for 72 hours, and subjected her to unimaginable terror. The evidence will show. Objection. Wellington didn't even stand. Counsel is testifying rather than outlining her case. Sustained. Ms. Chang, present your evidence, not your conclusions. Chang nodded, frustrated but undeterred. The evidence will show that Emma was found in a warehouse Mr. Brennan had access to through his former employment, that K-9 units tracked her scent to that location, that Mr. Brennan fled when police arrived. But as the days unfolded, Chang's case began to crumble under Wellington's surgical cross-examination. Detective Morrison took the stand on day 2, describing the investigation with professional precision. Wellington paced before her like a predator circling prey. "Detective, you stated Mr. Brennan fled when police arrived. Isn't it true he was simply leaving through the rear exit, an exit he'd used for 5 years while working there?" Morrison hesitated. He was moving quickly. Moving quickly. In an abandoned building that SWAT teams just breached with flashbangs and assault rifles. Who wouldn't move quickly, detective? The jury shifted uncomfortably. Worse came when the forensic team testified. No DNA evidence linked Brennan to Emma. No fingerprints. No physical trace evidence of any kind. The warehouse had been his workplace. His presence there was easily explained. Emma had been found in a section open to the elements, where transients sometimes sheltered. Any competent defense could argue she'd wandered there herself, though everyone knew that was absurd. "The prosecution has built an entire case on coincidence," Wellington declared during his cross-examination of the forensics expert. "My client worked in that building. Of course his presence can be explained. Where is the evidence of a crime? Maria sat in the gallery every day, her eyes boring into Brennan's back. He never looked at her, never showed remorse. Just sat there in his cheap suit, couldn't afford Wellington's wardrobe, apparently, looking like a normal middle-aged man who happened to be accused of monstrous acts. On day 3, Officer Hartley took the stand with Rex sitting obediently beside him. This was Chang's best hope, the dramatic rescue, the undeniable fact that Rex had tracked Emma to that specific location. "Officer Hartley, please describe Rex's tracking process," Chang prompted. Hartley explained with quiet pride how Rex had followed Emma's scent trail from her grandmother's yard to the warehouse, a distance of over 15 miles. The jury listened, some nodding appreciatively. Then Wellington began his cross-examination, and Chang's heart sank. "Officer Hartley, how many people touch a sidewalk in a given day?" I don't know, sir." "Hundreds, thousands, and scent molecules transfer through touch, correct?" "Yes, but Rex is trained to distinguish." "Trained, but not infallible. In fact, isn't it true that scent tracking can be contaminated by multiple people traveling the same route?" "Theoretically, but—" "Theoretically, so it's possible Rex followed a contaminated trail." Hartley's jaw tightened. "Highly unlikely." "But possible." "Impossible." Wellington turned to the jury with a theatrical shrug. "Reasonable doubt, ladies and gentlemen. That's all I need to show you. Possible explanations that don't involve my client committing any crime." That evening, Chang sat in her office, surrounded by evidence boxes and cold coffee. Martinez found her with her head in her hands. "We're losing," she said flatly. "The jury sees reasonable doubt everywhere Wellington points." "What about Emma?" Martinez asked carefully. "If we could get her testimony." "She's 3 years old, David. 3. No judge will let her testify traditionally, and even if Chen allowed it, Wellington would destroy her on cross. Can you imagine what that would do to that child?" They sat in heavy silence. Then Chang's eyes lit up with a desperate, possibly brilliant idea. What if we don't ask her to testify? What if we just bring her into the courtroom?" Martinez looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "What would that accomplish?" Chang leaned forward, her strategic mind racing. "Hartley's testifying tomorrow about the rescue. What if Emma were there, just present in her mother's arms? She has a right to see the proceedings technically. Chen will never allow it." "She might." Chang's voice grew stronger. "If we frame it as Emma's therapeutic right to witness justice for her trauma, Wellington will object, but it might rattle Brennan," Martinez finished, understanding dawning. "Just having her there in the room." It was a gamble, a desperate, controversial gamble. But they were out of options. Chang began drafting the motion immediately, knowing tomorrow would either save her case or end her career. The morning of day 4 arrived with unseasonable cold, as if the weather itself sensed the importance of what was about to unfold. Linda Chang stood before Judge Patricia Chen's chambers at 7:45 a.m., a full hour before court was scheduled to convene, clutching her emergency motion like a lifeline. Judge Chen sat behind her massive oak desk, reading glasses perched on her nose, her expression unreadable as she reviewed Chang's filing. The silence stretched so long that Chang could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. "You want to bring a 3-year-old trauma victim into my courtroom," Chen finally said, her voice carefully neutral. "Not to testify, not as evidence, simply to observe." "Yes, Your Honor." Chang stepped forward, her preparation evident in every word. "Emma Rodriguez has a constitutional right to be present during proceedings that directly concern her victimization. The Victim Rights Act specifically." "I know what the VRA says, Counselor." Chen removed her glasses, fixing Chang with a penetrating stare. "What I'm questioning is your motivation. This feels like courtroom theater designed to influence my jury." Chang met the judge's eyes steadily. Your Honor, Emma's therapist, Dr. Rachel Kim, has submitted an affidavit stating that witnessing the justice process may be beneficial to Emma's recovery. She needs to see that the system protects children, that the people who hurt her face consequences. Or, a voice interrupted from the doorway. The prosecution is desperate because their case is falling apart. Marcus Wellington strode into chambers without invitation, his presence filling the room with confrontational energy. Your Honor, this is a transparent attempt to prejudice the jury. A child crying in the courtroom. Wellington waved the motion dismissively. It's manipulative and inappropriate. Mr. Wellington, I don't recall inviting you to this conference, Chen said icily. The defense has a right to respond to motions that could fundamentally compromise a fair trial. Wellington dropped a thick brief on Chen's desk. I've cited 17 cases where similar tactics resulted in mistrials or overturned convictions. This is prejudicial grandstanding. Chang's voice cut through sharply. Emma Rodriguez is the victim in this case. She's not a prop or a tactic. She's a child who deserves to see that her voice matters, even if she can't speak it in traditional testimony. How convenient that her voice happens to be sitting in the courtroom looking sad while my client is on trial. Wellington's polished demeanor cracked slightly. Your Honor, you cannot allow this. Judge Chen stood, and both attorneys immediately fell silent. She walked to her window, looking out at the courthouse plaza where news vans had been camped for days. The weight of Solomon sat on her shoulders. Here's what's going to happen, Chen said, turning back to face them. I'm allowing the child's presence under strict conditions. Mrs. Rodriguez may bring Emma into the courtroom and sit in the front row of the gallery. The child will not approach the witness stand, the jury, or the defendant. If she becomes disruptive, she will be immediately removed. And counselors, both of you, if I detect even a hint that either side is using this child for theatrical purposes, I will declare a mistrial and hold you in contempt. Are we clear? Yes, Your Honor, they answered in unison. Good, now get out of my chambers. Court convenes in 45 minutes. Maria Rodriguez stood in the courthouse bathroom, gripping the sink with white knuckles, staring at her reflection. She'd barely slept, agonizing over whether bringing Emma into that courtroom was protective or damaging. Dr. Kim had assured her it could help, but what if it traumatized her daughter all over again? In the stall behind her, Emma hummed softly, a tuneless melody that somehow soothed Maria's frayed nerves. The 3-year-old had been excited this morning, thinking they were going on an adventure. Maria hadn't known how to explain that the adventure was watching the bad man who took her sit in a courtroom. Mommy, I'm done, Emma's voice rang out. Maria helped her daughter wash her tiny hands, then knelt to Emma's level. The little girl wore a simple blue dress. Chang had specifically requested nothing overly emotional or sympathy-inducing. Emma's blonde hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she clutched her beloved stuffed bunny. Baby, we're going into a big room with a lot of people, Maria said softly, searching her daughter's innocent blue eyes. You'll sit with Mommy the whole time, okay? If you get scared or want to leave, you just tell Mommy. Will the good doggy be there? Emma asked, her face brightening. Maria's heart clenched. Emma had talked about the good doggy constantly since her rescue. Rex had become a symbol of safety in her young mind. Yes, sweetheart. Officer Hartley and Rex will be there. Yay, Emma bounced on her toes. I like the good doggy. The courtroom fell into electric silence as Maria carried Emma through the heavy double doors. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Reporters frantically scribbled notes. Jurors tried not to stare but couldn't help glancing at the tiny blonde girl who'd been at the center of this nightmare. Michael Brennan's head snapped up, his face draining of color as he saw Emma for the first time since his arrest. His hand trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of the defense table. Wellington placed a warning hand on his client's arm, leaning close to whisper something urgent. Maria walked slowly down the center aisle, hyper-aware of every eye on them. She took her seat in the front row, directly behind the prosecution table. Emma settled onto her lap, looking around the impressive courtroom with wide-eyed curiosity. "Big room," Emma whispered. "Yes, baby, very big." Judge Chen entered, her expression stern. "All rise." The formalities proceeded with unusual tension. Everyone could feel it. The presence of the child had fundamentally altered the courtroom's atmosphere. This wasn't just legal procedure anymore. This was visceral, human, real. "The prosecution may call its next witness," Chen announced. "The people call Officer James Hartley," Chang declared. The courtroom doors opened, and Officer Hartley entered in his dress uniform, crisp and professional. Walking beside him, perfectly trained and magnificently proud, was Rex. Emma's entire face transformed. She sat up straighter, her eyes locked on the German Shepherd with instant recognition and pure joy. A small gasp escaped her lips. Hartley took his position at the witness stand, Rex sitting obediently at his side. The dog's intelligent brown eyes scanned the courtroom with calm authority, a working animal focused on his handler. Chang approached. "Officer Hartley, please state your position." K-9 officer with Louisville Metro Police, assigned to the Search and Rescue Division. "And this is your partner, Rex?" "Yes, ma'am. 4 years old, German Shepherd, certified in tracking and search operations." As Hartley spoke, describing Rex's training, certifications, and track record, Emma sat transfixed. She'd stopped playing with her bunny, stopped fidgeting. All her attention was on the dog who'd found her in that dark warehouse. Maria felt her daughter's body relax in her arms, the constant tension Emma carried beginning to ease. Just seeing Rex, the child felt safer. Wellington began his cross-examination, trying once again to undermine the reliability of K-9 tracking. But something was different this time. The jury wasn't just hearing about abstract scent molecules and contamination theories. They were looking at a real child who'd been really lost and really found by this real dog. "Officer Hartley, you claim Rex is reliable, but mistakes happen, don't they?" Wellington pressed. "Rex has never failed to." "That's when it happened." Emma slipped from her mother's lap so quickly that Maria barely registered the movement. The toddler's small feet hit the courtroom floor, and she began walking, toddling determinedly, toward the witness stand. "Emma," Maria whispered urgently, reaching for her daughter. But Emma kept going, her focus entirely on Rex. Bailiffs moved to intercede, but Judge Chen raised her hand, her eyes fixed on the small child crossing her courtroom with innocent purpose. The entire room held its collective breath. Emma stopped directly in front of Rex, who regarded her with gentle curiosity. She pointed her tiny finger at the German Shepherd, and in the absolute silence of that courtroom, she spoke 2 words that would echo through that space like a bell. "Good doggy." The 2 words hung in the air like a prayer, pure and simple. "Good doggy." Emma's small voice carried through the absolute silence of the courtroom with crystalline clarity. Every person present, from Judge Chen on her elevated bench to the court reporter whose fingers had frozen over her stenograph machine, was suspended in this moment, watching a 3-year-old child speak a truth so innocent it hurt. Rex, the professional working dog who'd been trained to ignore distractions, couldn't help but respond to the pure affection in the child's voice. His tail gave one gentle wag, his intelligent brown eyes softening as he looked at the little girl he tracked through 15 miles of urban darkness. Officer Hartley's throat tightened with emotion he couldn't quite name. In 4 years of working with Rex, he'd seen his partner find lost hikers, locate missing elderly patients, track fleeing suspects. But this, watching the child his dog had saved reach out with such trust and love, this was different. This was why they did the work. Emma took another small step closer, her hand extending tentatively toward Rex's head. The German Shepherd remained perfectly still, a 90-pound guardian allowing himself to be approached by someone who barely reached his shoulder. "Emma, honey," Maria called softly from her seat, torn between pulling her daughter back and allowing this moment of healing to unfold. Judge Chen made a subtle gesture to the bailiffs. "Let it happen." Emma's tiny fingers touched Rex's fur, stroking his head with the careful gentleness that small children reserve for beloved animals. "Good doggy," she repeated, her voice filled with wonder. "You found me." Those 3 additional words, "you found," shockwaves through the courtroom. Several jurors visibly fought tears. Linda Chang gripped the edge of her table, hardly daring to breathe. Even the court reporter blinked rapidly, trying to maintain her professional composure. Then Emma did something no one expected. She turned around. Her small body pivoted away from Rex, away from Officer Hartley, away from the safety and goodness they represented. Her blue eyes swept across the courtroom, taking in the unfamiliar faces, the imposing wood paneling, the serious adults watching her every move. And then her gaze landed on the defense table. On Michael Brennan. The transformation that came over Emma Rodriguez in that instant was devastating to witness. Her face, which had been open and joyful while petting Rex, crumpled into an expression of pure, primal terror. Her small body began to shake, trembling like a leaf in a violent storm. The color drained from her cheeks. Her arm rose, finger pointing directly at Brennan, with the absolute certainty that only truth possesses. "Bad man." The words came out as a whisper at first, barely audible. But they carried the weight of 72 hours of terror, of darkness and fear, of a child stolen from everything safe and familiar. Then louder, "Bad man." Brennan's face went absolutely white. His carefully maintained composure, the mask he'd worn throughout every day of the trial, shattered completely. His mouth opened slightly, his eyes widening with something that looked horribly like recognition and guilt. Emma's voice rose to a scream, her small body rigid with fear and fury. "Bad man, that's the bad man." The courtroom erupted. Maria launched from her seat, rushing forward to scoop Emma into her arms. The child buried her face in her mother's shoulder, sobbing with the kind of deep, soul-wrenching cries that come from the darkest places of trauma. "Objection!" Marcus Wellington was on his feet, his polished composure cracking. "Your Honor, this is completely inappropriate. The child's statement cannot be." "The bad man took me," Emma screamed through her tears, her voice muffled against Maria's shoulder but still audible throughout the courtroom. "The bad man! Mommy, the bad man!" Gasps and shocked exclamations rippled through the gallery. Reporters frantically scribbled notes. One juror, a middle-aged woman in the back row, openly wept. "Order!" Judge Chen's gavel cracked like thunder. "I will have order in this courtroom." But order was impossible. The dam had broken. Maria clutched her daughter, rocking her, whispering desperate reassurances while her own tears fell into Emma's blonde hair. "You're safe, baby. Mommy's got you. You're safe now." Brennan sat frozen at the defense table, staring at Emma with an expression that spoke volumes, not of innocence protesting false accusation, but of a guilty man confronted with the undeniable proof of his crime. His hands shook visibly. A thin sheen of sweat appeared on his forehead. Wellington tried to recover, his voice rising above the chaos. "Your Honor, this child has clearly been coached. This is a performance designed to—" "A performance," Maria whirled on him, her grief transforming into righteous fury. "My daughter is terrified. Look at her. Look at her." Emma's sobs were heartbreaking, her small body shaking with each breath. She kept repeating it over and over. "Bad man, bad man, bad man." Judge Chen's gavel continued to crack. "Mrs. Rodriguez, please remove the child from the courtroom. Bailiffs, clear the gallery. We're in recess. Counselors in my chambers. Now." As Maria carried Emma toward the courtroom doors, The child lifted her tear-streaked face from her mother's shoulder. Her eyes found Brennan one more time across the distance, and she pointed again with devastating finality. "You're bad," she said, her voice small but absolutely certain. "You hurt me." The words landed like stones in still water rippling outward, touching everyone present with their simple, terrible truth. Brennan's head dropped into his hands. His shoulders began to shake, whether with fear, remorse, or the realization that a 3-year-old's innocent recognition had destroyed his carefully constructed defense. No one could say, but everyone saw it. Wellington touched his client's shoulder, leaning close to whisper urgently. Brennan shook his head, something broken in the gesture. The bailiffs ushered the gallery out, but the damage, or rather the truth, had been done. 12 jurors had seen a child's raw, unscripted terror. They'd witnessed pure recognition, unspoiled by legal maneuvering or coached testimony. They'd seen innocence point at guilt and name it for what it was. As the courtroom emptied, Officer Hartley knelt beside Rex, his hand on his partner's head. The German shepherd watched the doors where Emma had disappeared, his ears forward, protective instincts engaged even now. "Good boy," Hartley whispered. "Such a good boy." In the hallway outside, Maria sat on a bench, holding Emma close, whispering love and safety and promises that the bad man couldn't hurt her anymore. Linda Chang stood nearby, giving them space, her mind racing with the legal implications of what had just occurred. And in the courtroom, now empty except for the bailiffs and court staff, 2 words seemed to echo from the walls. "Good doggy." "Bad man." Truth, spoken by the only voice that couldn't lie. Judge Patricia Chen's chambers felt smaller than usual with the tension that filled every corner. Linda Chang stood on one side of the room, her arms crossed, while Marcus Wellington paced like a caged animal on the other. Judge Chen sat behind her desk, her fingers steepled, her expression grave. "That," Wellington began, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, "was the most prejudicial display I have witnessed in 27 years of practicing law. Your Honor, I am moving for an immediate mistrial." "Denied," Chen said flatly. "Your Honor, you cannot." "I can and I will, Mr. Wellington." Chen's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "You fought to keep that child out of my courtroom. I allowed her presence over your objections under specific conditions. What happened was spontaneous and uncoached." "Uncoached?" Wellington's laugh was bitter. "A 3-year-old happens to identify my client at the exact moment that would most damage our defense. Your Honor, the prosecution orchestrated this." "I orchestrated nothing." Chang's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Emma Rodriguez is a traumatized child who recognized her abductor. That's not theater, that's trauma response. Any child psychologist would confirm." "Then let's bring in a child psychologist," Wellington shot back. "Let's examine whether this child has been influenced, coached, or manipulated by her mother, by therapists, by prosecutors desperate to secure a conviction on circumstantial evidence." Judge Chen raised her hand, silencing them both. "Here's what's going to happen. Ms. Chang, Emma's verbal statement will not be entered into the record as testimony. She is not a sworn witness, and her words do not constitute legal evidence." Chang's heart sank. "Your Honor." "However," Chen continued, "the jury witnessed what they witnessed. I cannot unring that bell. What the jury chooses to make of it during deliberations is beyond this court's control." Wellington's jaw tightened. "You're essentially allowing prejudicial evidence through a technicality." "I'm acknowledging reality, Mr. Wellington. Your client had a visible reaction to that child's words. The jury saw it. I saw it. Everyone in that courtroom saw it." Chen leaned forward. "Now, do you wish to move forward with this trial, or would your client prefer to explore other options?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implication. Wellington's expression hardened. "We're not discussing plea agreements." "I didn't mention plea agreements, counselor. I'm simply asking if you want to continue." Chen's eyes were steely. "Because if we continue, the prosecution will call Dr. Rachel Kim to discuss Emma's therapy sessions and her consistent descriptions of her captor. They'll present the warehouse evidence again. They'll walk the jury through every moment of that child's terror. Is that really what you want?" Wellington stared at the judge, then at Chang, calculation visible in his eyes. "I need to speak with my client." "You have until tomorrow morning," Chen said. "Court is adjourned until 9 a.m. Use your time wisely, gentlemen." In the courthouse corridor, Maria sat on a wooden bench, Emma finally quiet in her arms. The child had cried herself into exhaustion, her small fists clutching her mother's blouse, her face puffy and red from tears. Dr. Rachel Kim sat beside them, her presence calm and reassuring. "How is she?" Linda Chang approached cautiously, her voice gentle. "Exhausted," Maria answered, her own voice raw. "But Dr. Kim says this might actually help her healing process." Confronting him, numbing what he did. Dr. Kim nodded, her professional demeanor softened with compassion. "Trauma holds power in silence and darkness. Emma spoke her truth today. She named her fear. That's incredibly significant for a child her age." "Will she have to do it again?" Maria's eyes were desperate. "Will she have to testify?" "No," Chang said firmly. "Judge Chen made that clear. Emma's words won't be used as legal testimony, but—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "What happened today may change everything anyway." "What do you mean?" Chang glanced down the corridor toward the conference room where Wellington and Brennan had disappeared 30 minutes earlier. "I think Brennan's lawyer is advising him to take a deal." Inside the attorney-client conference room, Marcus Wellington sat across from Michael Brennan, watching his client unravel. The confident, detached demeanor Brennan had maintained throughout the investigation and trial had completely disintegrated. His hands shook as he gripped a paper cup of water. Sweat stained the collar of his shirt. "They have nothing concrete," Wellington said, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. "The child's outburst won't be admitted as testimony. We can still win this." "Did you see their faces?" Brennan's voice was hollow, broken. "The jury, they looked at me like you're guilty because that child made them feel something." Wellington leaned forward. "But feelings aren't evidence, Michael. We've built reasonable doubt into every piece of their case. The warehouse was your workplace. The K-9 tracking could be contaminated. There's no DNA, no witnesses, nothing that definitively—" "She recognized me." Brennan's words came out as a whisper. "That little girl, she knew." Wellington's eyes narrowed. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Brennan's voice cracked, "I'm saying I can't sit in that courtroom and have that child scream at me again. I can't watch her cry because of—" He stopped himself, but too late. Wellington sat back slowly, the pieces falling into place. Throughout the entire case, Brennan had maintained his innocence, claimed he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. But this was different. "Michael, as your attorney, I need to know." "Don't ask me questions you don't want answered," Brennan snapped. Then quieter, "What kind of deal could you get?" Wellington was silent for a long moment. His job was to defend his client, guilty or innocent. But he was also a father of 3, and watching Emma Rodriguez's terror had affected him more than he wanted to admit. "If I approach the prosecution now from a position of weakness, they'll demand the maximum. 25, 30 years minimum, no possibility of parole. And if we go to trial—" "Honestly, after today," Wellington ran his hand through his perfectly styled hair, disrupting it for the first time. "Jury could convict on emotion alone. You could get 40 years, or they could acquit because we've created enough reasonable doubt." He paused. "It's a gamble." Brennan closed his eyes, and Wellington saw something he'd never seen in his client before: genuine remorse. "I can't," Brennan's voice broke. "I can't make that little girl testify. I can't put her through more." Wellington stared at his client, and something shifted in the room, a tacit admission wrapped in concern for the victim. "Then we talk to the prosecution," Wellington said quietly. "But Michael, if you're going to do this, you do it right. Full allocution. Take responsibility. Show that jury, show that family, that you understand what you did." Brennan nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face. 25 years. Minimum. Maybe I can keep it there if you cooperate fully. "Do it," Brennan whispered. "Just make it stop. Make her stop crying because of me." That evening, Linda Chang's phone rang at 8:47 p.m. She saw Wellington's name on the screen and knew what was coming before she answered. "We want to talk," Wellington said without preamble. "I'm listening." "Full plea, kidnapping, child endangerment, false imprisonment. 25 years, no parole eligibility." Chang's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "He allocutes fully, on the record, every detail." "Agreed." "And he waives all appeal rights." Wellington hesitated, then, "Agreed." "Tomorrow morning, before Judge Chen." "We'll be ready." Chang ended the call and sat in stunned silence. They'd won. 2 words from a 3-year-old child, bad man, had accomplished what months of investigation and legal strategy couldn't. Truth, it turned out, was the most powerful evidence of all. The Jefferson County Courthouse felt different on the morning of Day 5. News vans lined the street, reporters speculating wildly about why court had been called into session an hour early. Inside, the gallery filled quickly with familiar faces, victim advocates, journalists who'd covered the case from the beginning, and Louisville residents who'd followed Emma's story with invested hearts. Maria Rodriguez sat in her usual seat, but Emma was not with her this time. The child was with her grandmother, playing with dolls, blissfully unaware that today would bring an end to the legal nightmare. Maria's hands trembled as she clutched a tissue, watching the defense table where Marcus Wellington sat with unusual solemnity. Linda Chang entered through the side door, her expression carefully neutral, but those who knew her well could see the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her eyes. She'd barely slept, going over every word of the plea agreement, ensuring there were no loopholes, no ways for Brennan to escape justice. When Michael Brennan was led in by bailiffs, the change in him was startling. Gone was the defiant posture, the blank expression he'd maintained throughout the trial. His shoulders slumped, his eyes were red-rimmed, and he moved like a man walking to his own execution, which, in a sense, he was. Judge Patricia Chen took the bench precisely at 8:00 a.m., her expression grave. She surveyed the packed courtroom, noting the palpable tension, the confusion on the faces of the jurors who'd been summoned but not yet told why. "This court is now in session," Chen announced. "Mr. Wellington, I understand you have a matter to bring before the court." Wellington stood, and for the first time in his illustrious career, he looked older than his 62 years. "Yes, Your Honor, the defense wishes to enter a change of plea." A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. The jurors looked at each other in surprise. Maria's hand flew to her mouth, afraid to hope. "Mr. Brennan, please rise," Judge Chen commanded. Brennan stood on shaking legs, his lawyer's hand on his elbow for support. "Mr. Brennan, you are currently charged with kidnapping in the first degree, child endangerment, and false imprisonment. How do you now plead to these charges?" The courtroom held its collective breath. "Guilty, Your Honor," Brennan's voice cracked on the words, "to all charges." The gallery erupted. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Maria began to sob, relief and rage and grief pouring out in equal measure. Judge Chen's gavel cracked repeatedly, demanding order. "Furthermore, Your Honor," Wellington continued, his voice heavy, "my client wishes to make a full allocution before this court." Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. "The defendant wishes to make a statement." "Yes, Your Honor." This was unusual. Most plea deals involved minimal statements, just enough to satisfy the legal requirement of admitting guilt. But a full allocution meant Brennan would detail everything, every moment, every action, every crime. "Very well," Chen said, her tone softening almost imperceptibly. She understood what this meant for the Rodriguez family. "Mr. Brennan, you may proceed. I remind you that you are under oath and anything you say can and will be part of the permanent record." Brennan swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, forcing everyone to lean forward to hear. "On July 15th, I was driving past the Rodriguez residence on Maple Street. I saw Emma playing in the front yard. I don't have an excuse. I don't have a reason that makes sense. I saw her and something dark inside me took over." His voice broke, tears streaming down his face. "I pulled over. I called to her, told her I'd found a lost puppy in my car. She was so innocent, so trusting. She came to me." Maria's sobs grew louder. Two victim advocates moved to sit on either side of her, offering silent support. "I drove her to the warehouse where I used to work. I knew it was abandoned. I knew no one would find us there." Brennan's hands clenched into fists. "For 3 days I kept her in that dark building. She cried for her mother constantly. She was terrified. She begged me to take her home." "And you didn't," Judge Chen said, her voice cold as steel. "No, Your Honor, I didn't." Brennan's legs seemed barely able to support him. "I told myself I would. I kept saying tomorrow, tomorrow I'll figure this out. But I was a coward. I knew what I'd done was monstrous, and I was too much of a coward to face it." "Why did you keep her there?" Chang asked, standing at her table. "What did you want from her?" Brennan's face crumpled. "Nothing. I think I just didn't want to be alone. I'm sick. I know that now. I've known it for a long time, but I never got help, and an innocent child paid the price for my sickness." "The night the police arrived," Wellington prompted, though it clearly pained him to do so. "I heard the dogs barking, heard the sirens. I knew they'd found us. I tried to run, but part of me was relieved, because I knew I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep hurting her." Judge Chen leaned forward, her eyes boring into Brennan. "Mr. Brennan, you subjected a 3-year-old child to unimaginable terror. You stole her from her family, from her safety, from her childhood innocence. Do you understand the magnitude of what you've done?" "Yes, Your Honor." Brennan's voice was steady now, as if confession had given him some measure of strength. "I stole her childhood. I gave her nightmares that will last years, maybe forever. I hurt her family in ways I can't even comprehend, and I'm prepared to pay for that." "The plea agreement calls for 25 years without possibility of parole," Chen said. "Do you accept these terms?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you understand that you will likely spend the rest of your productive life in prison?" "Yes, Your Honor, and that's not enough. Nothing I can do will ever be enough to make up for what I did to Emma Rodriguez." Chen sat back, studying the broken man before her. In her 2 decades on the bench, she'd seen hundreds of defendants. Some showed genuine remorse, others performed it convincingly. But this felt real. This felt like a man confronting the monster he'd become. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Chen said gently, "would you like to make a victim impact statement before I impose sentence?" Maria stood slowly, her legs unsteady. She walked to the podium, gripping its edges to keep from collapsing. When she looked at Brennan, her eyes burned with an intensity that made him flinch. "You stole my daughter," Maria said, her voice raw but powerful. "You took her smile, her fearlessness, her ability to play in a yard without terror. She wakes up screaming. She can't be in the dark. She's afraid of strangers, of being alone, of everything." Brennan's tears fell freely now. "But you didn't break her," Maria continued, her voice growing stronger. "Emma is strong, she's brave. She pointed at you and called you what you are, a bad man. And because she had that courage, you're standing here admitting what you did. My 3-year-old daughter is braver than you ever were." The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of Maria's voice. "I hope you think about her every day in prison. I hope you remember her crying for me, and I hope you use whatever life you have left to become something better than the monster who stole my child." Maria returned to her seat, and Chen gave her a moment before proceeding. "Michael James Brennan, it is the judgment of this court that you be remanded to the custody of the Kentucky Department of Corrections for a period of 25 years without possibility of parole. May God have mercy on your soul." The gavel fell with finality. The gavel's echo faded, but its finality resonated through every heart in the courtroom. Bailiffs moved efficiently to escort Michael Brennan away, his shoulders hunched, his head bowed. He paused for just a moment, turning to look at Maria Rodriguez one last time. She met his gaze with steel in her eyes, and he nodded, a small acknowledgement of the devastation he'd caused, before being led through the side door that would take him to begin his 25-year sentence. Maria collapsed into her seat, her entire body shaking with the release of 6 months of anguish, fear, and desperate hope. The victim advocates embraced her as she wept, not tears of sadness now, but of relief, of vindication, of a mother's fierce love finally seeing justice served. Linda Chang approached slowly, kneeling beside Maria's chair. "It's over," the prosecutor said softly, her own eyes glistening. "He can never hurt her again." Maria grabbed Chang's hands, squeezing them tightly. Thank you for believing us, for fighting for my baby." "Your baby fought for herself," Chang replied, thinking of Emma's small finger pointing, her voice crying out the truth. "She's the bravest person I've ever met." Outside in the courthouse hallway, Officer James Hartley waited with Rex, having stayed for the entire proceeding. When the courtroom doors opened and the crowd began to spill out, he stood at attention, his partner sitting alertly beside him. He'd come to see this through to the end, to witness justice for the little girl his dog had saved. Maria emerged, supported by family members, her face exhausted but lighter somehow, as if a terrible weight had been lifted. When she saw Hartley and Rex, she stopped, fresh tears flowing. "Officer Hartley," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Ma'am," Hartley nodded respectfully. "I wanted to be here, Rex and we had to see it through." "You saved her life," Maria said simply. "You and this magnificent dog. How do I ever thank you for that?" "Seeing her safe, seeing justice served. That's all the thanks I need." Maria looked down at Rex, who gazed back at her with those intelligent brown eyes. On impulse, she knelt and wrapped her arms around the German shepherd's neck, hugging him close. Rex, trained to remain calm in all situations, stood perfectly still, accepting the gratitude being poured into his fur. "Good boy," Maria whispered. "Such a good boy." 3 days later, on a sunny Saturday morning that felt like redemption, the Rodriguez family gathered on those same courthouse steps for a very different reason. The Louisville Metro Police Department had organized a small ceremony to formally commend Officer Hartley and Rex for their extraordinary service in Emma's rescue. This time Emma was there. The little girl wore a bright pink dress with flowers on it, her blonde hair in 2 neat braids. She held her mother's hand tightly, but there was light in her eyes that had been absent for months. She'd been told she was going to see the good doggy, and she'd talked about nothing else for 3 days. Chief of Police Richard Morrison stood at a podium, addressing the gathered crowd of officers, city officials, media, and citizens. "In our darkest hours, heroes emerge. Sometimes those heroes have 4 legs and a sense of smell 40 times more powerful than our own." The crowd chuckled appreciatively. Officer Hartley and K9 Rex represent the very best of what it means to serve and protect. Their dedication, skill, and refusal to give up brought Emma Rodriguez home to her family. Today, we honor that service. Hartley stepped forward, accepting a commendation plaque, but his eyes kept drifting to Emma, who was squirming with barely contained excitement, her gaze locked on Rex. When the formal part of the ceremony concluded, Chief Morrison smiled. "I believe someone has been very patient and deserves a moment with our hero." Maria released Emma's hand, and the 3-year-old needed no further invitation. She ran, actually ran, something she'd been afraid to do in open spaces since her abduction, straight to Officer Hartley and Rex. Hartley knelt immediately, bringing himself to Emma's level. "Hello again, Emma." "Hi," Emma beamed at him, then immediately turned her attention to Rex. "Hi, good doggy." "Would you like to pet him?" Hartley asked gently. Emma nodded enthusiastically, and Hartley gave Rex a subtle command. The German shepherd moved closer, lowering his head to make it easier for small hands to reach. Emma's fingers sank into Rex's fur, stroking his head, his ears, his neck. The joy on her face was transcendent, transforming her from a traumatized victim into simply a child delighting in a beloved dog. "You found me," Emma said, her voice full of wonder and certainty. "You're the good doggy who found me in the dark place." Rex's tail wagged gently, and he leaned into her touch. The photographer's present captured the moment from every angle. A little girl in a pink dress, her fear conquered, embracing the dog who tracked her through darkness and brought her back to light. The image would become iconic, appearing in newspapers across the country, shared millions of times on social media, printed and framed in police stations from coast to coast. But for those present, it wasn't about the photograph. It was about witnessing healing in real time, about seeing innocence restored, about remembering why they'd chosen to serve and protect. Maria stood with Linda Chang, both women crying happy tears. "She's getting better," Maria said softly. "Slowly, but she's getting better. The nightmares are less frequent. She's starting to play again, to laugh." "Children are resilient," Chang replied, "especially brave ones. She talks about Rex all the time, says he's her guardian angel with fur." Hartley overheard and smiled. "Rex has participated in 19 searches since Emma's case," he told them. "We've found 12 people, including 3 more children. Every time I think of Emma, she reminds me why we do this work." Emma suddenly threw her arms around Rex's neck, hugging him tightly. "I love you, good doggy," she declared with all the fierce certainty a 3-year-old could muster. The crowd collectively melted. 6 months after the ceremony, on a bright spring morning, Emma Rodriguez started preschool. She walked into her classroom holding her mother's hand, a brand new backpack on her small shoulders. On that backpack was a patch her grandmother had sewn on, an embroidered German shepherd with the words "Guardian Angel" beneath it. When her teacher asked each child to share something special about themselves, Emma stood up proudly. "A good doggy saved me," she announced to her classmates. "His name is Rex and he's a hero." That same day, Officer Hartley and Rex responded to a call about a missing elderly man with dementia. They found him within 2 hours, confused but safe, and returned him to his grateful family. The work continued. The healing continued. The stories of courage, both 4-legged and 2-legged, continued. And in courtrooms across America, prosecutors and victim advocates quietly shared the story of the toddler who pointed at a K9 and said 2 words that changed everything. "Good doggy." Because sometimes, the simplest truths are the most powerful. Sometimes, innocence recognizes evil and calls it by name. And sometimes, heroes come with fur, 4 legs, and a nose that can track hope through the darkest wilderness and bring it safely home. The end.